So, who would be your favorite old timer?
Living or dead?
Both.
Both.
Actually.
Okay. Definitely my favorite living old timer would be Sailor Jerry Swallow.
Yeah.
For tons of reasons. He's a good friend of mine. I've always known about him. The first time I met him was at the Mad Hatter's Tea Party in Maine.
Oh, really?
Yeah. We were working down there. We had a booth. We were set up next to, I think it was next to Dick Wersaki and Brian Everett and Jack Rudy. And here comes Jerry coming down the line, looking at everybody's tables. And I don't remember how I knew that was Jerry Swallow, but somebody told me that's Sailor Jerry Swallow. And I had heard about Jerry from Little Vic.
Yeah.
And comes along, and I'm like, holy fuck, he's going to look at my stuff. And he comes up to the table, and he's like looking at my stuff and goes, and off he went. And I was devastated. I was like, he doesn't like it. And years later, I asked him about that, and he goes, "Yeah, I remember that, pal." You know how he talks.
Yeah.
And I said, "Yes." You were looking at it and shaking your head. He's like, "I was really impressed," and I thought, "Holy fuck." What, like he was shaking his head for good reasons, not bad reasons. He was like, "Boy, these guys are good. Holy fuck." Which, you know what, they were shitty drawings, like I said before. But I guess, he liked them, whatever. And then the first time I went down there with Mac Bragg, and for some reason I was a vegetarian at that time. There's nothing wrong with being a vegetarian.
Yeah.
But I don't know why I was a vegetarian. I think it was a girl I was dating or something. But so we sit down for dinner, and his wife has made meatloaf.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, fuck, I'm going to eat the meatloaf. I'm not going to, be an asshole. And then the next day we had, I can't remember, every fucking night we were there, we had some big meat dish. And Mac had told Jerry that I was a vegetarian, right?
Okay.
But he was just like, fuck that. And the last day, he said, Mike, next time you come down here, he goes, there's lots of good leaves and grass up there in the bushes behind the house if you're hungry. And I was like, what the fuck does that mean, right? And he starts laughing, and I was so fucking sick, though. Like, at night, my stomach was just killing me from eating all this meatloaf. But I don't know, that made an impression on him. Yeah, I don't even know how many years ago that was. That was a long fucking time ago. Him and I, we used to write letters to each other all the time. And then, of course, computers came along and people started emailing.
Yeah.
And then, whatever, Instagram and all that shit. I'm off all that crap. And I got a letter from him. As I said, and I think you were the one that was behind that. So we've gone back to writing letters, and I love it. I enjoy it. It's pretty cool. And he counts he looks at the postmark and counts the days since it was written, since I received it, and gives me shit if I don't answer the letter within a certain period of time.
Yeah.
Which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, and recently I've been on the phone with Jerry quite a bit. In the evenings, I give him a call every so often, and I love his mind and how he preserves the history. And Jerry goes to bed thinking about the tradition, history of tattooing, and he's reviewing these stories in his mind, and he wakes up thinking about these stories. And
that's why he remembers everything.
Yeah.
His mind it's like a glue trap, like nothing gets out of it, right? And we've talked about this before, but that's storytelling. You have to tell the story over and over. You don't change the telling of it, like primitive societies that don't have any writing. Mm-hmm. It's very important that the Inuit are like that. When they recite their legends and stories, they tell them exactly the same every single time, because that way they stay true. They don't get elaborated on or fucking exaggerated or anything like that. And Jerry tells the stories the exact same way every time.
Yeah, and
it's essential.
That's the importance of writing these books for me, is that I'm telling 300 stories of Canadian tattooers, and by telling their story, we're preserving that history.
300 stories. 300, eh?
Yeah, I'm figuring it's about be around 300. I've captured over 200 interviews now. I've transcribed well over 100 of them, and the file up for the 3 books is getting pretty big.
Is it going to be like 100, 100, 100, or probably haven't figured that out yet?
It actually goes from 1900 to 1970s. The first
one,
book 1,
right?
And then book 2 is 80s to 2000,
and then
book
after
3 is 2000 beyond.
Okay.
So, because I kind of look at the history of tattooing in these 3 different eras, so I divided the books up into 3. It was like what was happening the 70s and before, and then from the 70s to the 2000, there was such a significant change in tattooing.
Yeah, it was kind of like what's going on now, right?
Yeah, and then in 2000 it blew up again, but exponentially blew up. Like, there's just I will not be able to document all the tattooers of today.
No, fuck no. There's too many, and they're not as individual as the previous generations, right?
That's right.
I don't know. I may have already said that business about if you had 10 of them line up in here, 10 old timers, they'd all look different. They'd all dress different. They'd all be from different parts of the country, and you could tell everybody's work by looking at it. But I think there's people that are meant to do it.
That's right.
And will always do it. Not to take anything away from anybody else.
No,
but
and I think you're right on that, Mike. There's certain individuals that it's already in them, and they just haven't done it in the real time.
Yeah.
That there's this, they have to tattoo.
Yeah.
There's certain amount of tattooers that are called to it, and I think that's so it still rings true today.
Yeah.
There's still people being called into this industry, and quite often when people ask me how do I get into it, I'll say don't.
I say it. People ask all the time, "Hey, my kid wants to get into tattooing. Can you help out?" Or how do I? Can you tell me where to get a good tattoo gun? Or so and so got a kit on Amazon, and like that's not how you do it, man.
But I'll always follow up by saying that if it's in your heart, you'll find a way.
Yeah, that's true.
And you'll make it happen.
Yeah.
Kind of like our generation.
Yeah.
We had
if
to
you're
really
meant to, you will
toil for that, and it bared fruit for us. So your favorite old timer.
That was my favorite living one.
Living one.
I've reflected on my favorite dead old timer, and there's actually a few of them. Dave Shore.
Yeah.
Right here. Awesome guy. Scary. When I first met him, I met him in Dunstable, I think in '89, and he gave me some good advice. I've mentioned it before. He was complimenting me on a tattoo I had done, and I was getting a big head and agreeing with him and everything, and he's like, "Hey, hold on." He said, I said that was a good tattoo. It's not a great tattoo.
Yeah.
You still got a long way to go, so don't get too ahead of yourself. And I was like, holy fuck, that hurt. But it was good advice.
He was the man to give that kind of advice.
He would. He didn't care. That guy was tough as nails, man.
Yeah.
Totally. Like, the tattoo world that he grew up in, 98% or 99% of the people that are doing it right now would never have lasted in that world. It was a tough fucking world to be a part of. You know? There's him. There's Beachcomber Bill, right?
Yeah.
Al Newcomb. Cap Coleman, obviously. Cap Coleman. Like, I didn't know him, but I know his art, and I know people that were influenced by him. Jerry Swallow, for instance. It's hard to pick a favorite dead old timer, really, because there's so many of them, and they each had their own special little thing, and like I said, they're all individuals. So it's like trying to pick your favorite fucking song. or your favorite food. I don't know. They're all so different.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. Dave Shore, he got his first tattoo machine from Brian Zuck.
Yeah.
That's where Brian had bought a tattoo setup. I think it was Milton Zeiss
Okay.
setup.
Uh-huh.
I'd have to go back to my files, but yeah, and that's where he had asked Brian if he could borrow that machine, because Brian started tattooing and then just stopped and set it down because he didn't feel like he knew enough about it and just put it down. And then Dave Shore asked to borrow that tattoo machine.
No shit, eh?
A little bit of Dave Shore history there.
I've got his tattoo machines. Not that one, but I got the ones that he was using.
Yeah, his daily runners.
Yeah, his daily drivers. I got them from Gemma. They're like old swing gate prototypes by Bob Shaw.
Okay.
And then the little 1970s little tattoo machine zip up fucking pocket thing you carried around. He took those machines all over the place, man.
Yeah. Yeah, when I think about old timers, my favorite, and people are gonna groan when they hear this, but was Sailor Fred.
Yukon Jim.
Yeah, like for old timers that have passed on, he's one of the many old timers that I think about.
Mm-hmm.
But the funny thing is when I drove across Canada interviewing tattooists, people talked about him.
Mm-hmm.
All over Canada, people were talking about Sailor Fred. Even Paul Jeffries was talking about Sailor Fred.
Mm-hmm.
I think he referenced Sailor Fred did wiffle shading, and he was trying to teach Paul how to wiffle shade.
That's so weird, eh? Like is that whip shading? Because whip shading is a thing. I wonder if those guys all had their own weird.
Yeah.
Because nothing was set in stone. You could do anything you wanted. Like the story of him tattooing all these beautiful colors into some lady's arm or some guy's arm out in Halifax, and I think it was a guy came in to Jerry's shop and he had all these beautiful colors.
Yeah.
Purples and pinks and yellows and things that just didn't exist back then.
Mm-hmm.
And then Jerry saw Fred on the street somewhere, and he's like, "Fred, where'd you get those beautiful inks from? Like, I've never seen colors like that before." And he said, "Those were watercolors. I just used watercolor paint."
Yeah, Winsor Newton, and that would have fallen out. Like,
oh yeah, it probably would have made a mess.
Yeah.
Too. Yeah, I don't think you're supposed to ingest that shit. Yeah, like but back at that time, like he was a carny, right? So those guys traveled all over the fucking place. I'm sure he was all over the States too, that guy. I know he used to go down and see Paul Rogers.
Mm-hmm.
Because Jerry told me one time he was sitting with Paul in his shed, and here comes Sailor Fred, but he used to call himself Yukon Jim back then.
That's right.
But then he had a mishap with a laser that he had assembled from Popular Mechanics, I think it was.
That's what I heard, yeah.
And some poor bastard had a rose on his ass.
Casey Davis told me. You remember Casey Davis?
Yeah.
He told me that he met the guy that had the hole blown in his ass, and he still walked with a cane.
No shit, eh?
Yeah.
Holy fuck, yeah. Well, I guess it made a hell of a pop.
Yeah.
And the guy, Jerry told me, like, Fred had a family. He had a wife and kids.
Yeah.
And he said Fred just beat it on out of there, and nobody ever knew what happened to him until he showed up in Ontario under the moniker of Sailor Fred.
Yeah.
No more Yukon Jim.
Yeah.
But he was even Newfoundland. He told Jerry that the one time he went and took a trip to Newfoundland, it was such a big deal that they had a marching band marching around playing because he was there.
Yeah.
And that's awesome. I mean, those stories they're great stories. They're just,
He was a colorful character and an egregious character at that. He was tough and he didn't take no shit from anyone.
Big fucker too.
I got to meet him. Mm-hmm. If I could dial back time, I would have had a million questions.
You worked with him?
Yeah, at Reverend Gene Dishman's tattoo shop.
Tattoos
Unlimited or Canada's Artistic.
Artistic Tattoo is what it was
Canada's
called.
#1 tattoo shop.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a green sign.
Do you remember when those guys sort of took all the names of the tattoo shops in London and put them together in one big long thing, like
Yeah, I remember you
artistic Green Dragon Tattoos Unlimited or something like
Yeah.
that. And,
There was a shop in Toronto that the guy opened. He called it New Cool Tattoo, and New Tribe wouldn't hire him. Way Cool wouldn't hire him, so he opened his own shop and called it New Cool.
no way.
And apparently, I asked Dave, Psycho Dave, about it. He didn't know the shop, but apparently he wasn't open too long because Ace didn't really agree with the name, and
No.
I don't think New Tribe did either.
No, you didn't go around doing that back in those
Yeah.
days. We went down to Artistic Blue Dragons Tattoos Unlimited, whatever the fuck. It was so funny. It just went all along the window, the name.
Yeah.
And Gene was in there, and we went in, Darren, Frank, and I, and Frank flipped out on Gene, told him
Okay.
to take it off the window.
Yeah.
And I remember Frank totally lying. He's like, Gene said, "You're called Blue Dragon, mine's called the Green Dragon," or maybe it was Red Dragon. I think it was Red Dragon.
Yeah.
And Frank said, "I copyrighted all the different colors of dragons when I did Blue Dragon. I've got it all copyrighted," which was horse shit.
Yeah.
And then, so we ended up leaving. And then the next day, the phone rings at the tattoo shop. And I pick it up, and I go, "Blue Dragon Tattoo," and I hear this voice go, "Don't take the name of Reverend Gene in vain."
Yeah.
And it was Sailor Fred.
Okay.
And then he talked about how he had a gun or something like this, and,
Yeah.
cocky. I was like, fuck off. You know?
Don't take the name of Reverend Gene
Gene
in
in
vain.
vain. The way he said it, right? He talked like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. I remember when I worked for Gene for a month, and then he wanted me to reuse tubes that I had used already without sterilizing them, so I quit. But Sailor Fred was in the front of that shop, and the one day we were sitting around, and he decided he was going to impart some real tattoo knowledge on me, and he told me that I could spoon the needles.
Spoon the needles.
Yeah,
That's
so
like
he-
sleep with them.
No. He had a whole theory on this. You'd take the needle and you take a hammer and you pound it all out and
Would you pound it into a spoon
in
or
like
something?
a spoon shape.
So it looked like a spoon.
Yeah.
So they'd be like little fucking sickle blades that would
Pretty
just
much.
shred the fuck out of everything.
Yeah.
You could put a tattoo in and remove it at the same time.
So I know how to wiffle shade now.
With the spoon
We need
needles.
Spoon needles, yeah. But again, that's the funny part about it, is that these characters that showed up, like Sailor Fred, we all talk about him. And
yeah, he's going to live on forever.
his
you know?
stories are part of the Canadian history.
It's all a part. Like we were saying, it's like a web or a wheel or spokes in a wheel, strands in a web. Like it's all, everybody's part of it. You know, everybody's got their own special little part.
That's
and
right.
it's just as important as everything else,
Yeah.
as everyone else's part. I mean,
I remember the time that you and I went up and saw Smokey Nightingale.
yeah.
That was
yeah.
that was a really great trip. Smokey was such an interesting character in tattooing.
He was fascinating. He was like a Renaissance man. He fucking invented everything and made everything. That tattoo machine that he made
Yeah,
was
it was ahead of its time.
way ahead of there. What was the guy in the States that Danny Fowler sort of took that and ran with it? I think that, but everything was adjustable on that machine. I remember when you and I went to go see him, he had some side plates of those hanging on the wall.
Yeah,
Fuck, such cool.
and I got a photograph of the patent for that tattoo machine.
okay. Mhm.
That I'll show in the book.
Put in the book, yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah,
And
even
he-
the front tipped out, like the tube tipped. I'm not sure.
Really?
Yeah, like the hanger,
Like the tube holder,
Yeah,
the grip,
the grip.
the vice grip or whatever.
That's
Really?
right.
Holy fuck!
It had this tipping mechanism on it, and all
Everything.
kinds of.
He dressed up like a Victorian gentleman, 3-piece suit and a Stetson hat and his walking stick that probably had a sword in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a real character, man. I'm really glad that we got to go and visit him. That
And
was
that-
a good day.
That sort of leans into what you were saying. Like, he was identifiable. Like, you put him in the room and you put Beachcomber Bill in the room, two different characters.
Yeah, and Little Vic and Al Newcomb.
Yeah.
And Sailor Fred and fucking Reverend Gene and Frank Mount. I remember when all these guys were in a room.
Yeah.
Snake, remember Snake?
Bill Pulley.
He got. There was a protest in London because he got kicked out of the mall, and Little Vic seized upon that. Little Vic's shop was called Finesse Tattoo, and Vic was originally from Sarnia. But I think he was out west. I remember he had a bunch of work by Paul Jeffries, and he knew Bill Baker. He was the one that told me about Sailor Jerry. That's the first time I heard of Sailor Jerry. And so Snake got kicked out of the mall. But it wasn't because of his tattoos. It was because he had a bunch of street kids following him around all over the place. I was told. Snake's still with us, and I'm probably not telling the right story, but the story I was told was that these kids would go around and they were, like annoying people. They just loitering. So the security guard kicked him out with these kids. But he did get kicked out of the Mascot restaurant down on Dundas Street because of his tattoos. So we decided we're going to have a protest. Down we go to the mall. Security guy comes along and says, no, this is what happened. And we're like, oh, okay. So then we go down to the Mascot and we had a big protest. But before we went to this protest, Vic got everybody together. There was the Blue Dragon. Vic was there. I think Joe Higgins was there. Yep. Joker Joe, Frank, Darren, and I. Who else was there? Al Newcomb was there. What were those? What were they called? There was a guy and his wife that used to.
Sure.
What the fuck were they called now? You and I have talked about them before. They were all these different tattooers there. Anyways.
El
Toro. Yeah,
okay.
That's it. Yeah, they were there too.
Really?
Yeah.
Because they're from Cornwall.
I'm sure it was El Toro. Yeah, El Toro Tattoo was the guy and his wife.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it was them.
Yeah.
And we're all in there planning out this protest and everything. And I remember sitting there looking around the room. And like, what a fucking interesting assortment of individuals.
That's
you
right.
know, like it was just, they were so fucking different from each other, you know?
Exactly.
But we all got together, we went down, we went and did the protest. There was this fucking cop there, and he was an asshole. He was all pissed off. And Frank told me the only reason, he had me, Little Vic had these signs made up that everyone carried around.
Okay.
Frank had me draw these big giant signs with, that one had a Viking on it and one had a skull on it, and it said, Blue Dragon Tattoo Company says, whatever the fuck it said.
Yeah, so, and then in little tiny quotes.
Don't kick him out of the mall.
Yeah,
it was just advertising for him.
Yeah.
He was a businessman.
He was working angles.
But that was But that was a really neat experience. I've got all the newspaper articles from that. I got photographs from that day, like all that stuff.
Yeah.
Next, Mike and I move into a conversation about the importance of preserving the Canadian tattoo history.
They say history is written by the victor, but we're not the victors. We're the tattooers, right? You're going right to the people and getting their stories and putting it down so it can't be messed with. And in the future, there will be tattooers. Maybe they're not even born yet. Maybe they're running around in diapers shitting themselves. But they're going to want to know the history.
Yeah.
And you're putting that in this book for them. Just like I wish I could go back in time and ask all these other guys that came before us their stories, right?
Yeah.
But nobody sat down and interviewed them.
Yeah.
All you know is just what was written down in a newspaper or some guy, wrote something. We don't know.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know. So we guess. And guessing is not good, I think.
Well, and I think, when you and I got into tattooing, there was something that was incredibly special about tattooing, and we felt a sense of camaraderie and brotherhood, and we're connected to each other. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of what I hope will come out of the subtext of all these books, is when we understand each other's story, we feel more connected to each other.
Yeah.
And by sharing the story of all these different tattooers across Canada, I think this is going to help us feel more connected to each other and bring a greater sense of family back into tattooing.
I hope so. I'd like to see that. I'd like to see it. I think it needs to. It wouldn't be such a bad thing if it sort of fell from grace again for a little bit. You know, it'll always be around. It's been around for
as long as they found
hundreds of
human
thousands
life.
of years, right? Yeah, ever since we sat around friggin' fires with spears, it'll always be there, and there'll always be people carrying it forward, and then people carrying it forward from them. Like what you're doing with the book, right? You're carrying it forward, and it's important. It's very important.
Well, Mike, I really appreciate you coming on to do this interview. It's been such a pleasure. You've been a part of my personal history and inspired me in so many ways, and I appreciate that. And right from the start of this book project, you've been a huge supporter, and I've been able to capture interviews that I don't think I would have got without your help and influence.
Really?
Yeah, like Tony Danessa. You know, I know that he gave me that interview because, you know, you sent along a referral, and when I go back to the very beginning of this project, I remember calling you up before I was going to leave for my big voyage out west and asked if you'd send me off with a tattooer's blessing and something to appease the tattoo gods, and you said, yeah, come on over after work, and you sent me off, and you were supportive of it, and it's been such an honor and privilege to have your support and the support of the whole industry. I've been well received, and I appreciate that so much.
Well, you're doing what I think you're meant to do, and you have a gift for doing it, and you have my unwavering support.
Yeah.
So keep up the good work.
Thanks, Mike.
No worries.
And Mike's going to do book cover number 1.
I am. I got a great idea too. You got to tell me when to get started.
There's no rush.
I know.
I keep saying.
I know.
I keep saying I'm about a year out, but I said that almost.
It'll happen when it's
9
happening.
months ago.
It's all up here. I've got it. It's going to be really cool, man. It's going to be really, really cool. Yeah.
Well, everybody, thanks for taking the time to watch this video. I hope you enjoyed our conversation here today.
It was good.
Yeah.
It was very good. Yeah.
Again, thanks, Mike, for taking the time to do this.
My pleasure.